Chapter 9, Section 2 in the 8th grade note-taking guide is entitled Identifying Sampling Errors and Bias. So we're continuing to take a look at proper surveying methods and proper sampling methods here as we examine the concept of probability here. Again, this is a very important thing because if you don't do the survey right, if you're not doing those components right, you don't really have a valid survey, a valid sample. If you don't have a valid sample, you're really not talking about probability, which is why they're spending time talking about this. So, let's take a look here. We're talking about bias in our definitions. A biased sample is a sample that does not fairly represent the population, while a biased question is a question that leads people to give a certain answer. A biased sample is a sample that does not fairly represent the population. A biased question is a question that leads people to give a certain answer. So, let's go ahead and take a look at question 1 here, where we're going to talk about the biased samples and see what that exactly looks like. It's asking us to determine whether each sample may be biased, and then we are to explain. In Part A, an employee of a phone company randomly chooses 80 customers to ask whether they are happy with their service. Well, again, we've talked about this last week. That whole idea of things being random is the great equalizer. And indeed here, they've thrown the word random at us again. And that's good, because when we see random, that's generally going to eliminate the possibility of bias here. So indeed, that's exactly how this answer reads. If the sample is not biased because it is a random sample. In Part B, it's asking the first 25 students to arrive at school, and surveying them to find out how they get to school. Well, chances are, if they're the first 25 to get there, they're all getting there the same kind of way. For instance, if I looked at our school, and I looked at the people that get to school at 7 o'clock in the morning, chances are they're not coming to school on the bus, because most of you know the buses don't pull in until around 7:20, 7:30. So chances are, if they're there at 7 in the morning, they drive themselves or get dropped off by somebody that drives. That's going to feature a very heavy bias there. All right, so indeed here, it is biased. It is likely that indeed in this situation here, those 25 students all got there by the same method. All right, so we've taken a look at biased samples. Now let's look at biased questions. Question A says, do you prefer broccoli or corn? All right, well, that's not biased. All right, it's a perfectly legitimate question. Broccoli or corn, you have two choices. They're different things. That's not a problem. It does not lead people to choose one item over the other. However, in Part B, it says, would you rather drive this luxurious and roomy sedan or this tiny compact car? Well, it's presenting one here as being something fabulous and wonderful and great, and the other one's just kind of a push away here. Right? Well, it's making you believe that you should be picking the nice, luxurious one that everybody would want. So because of that, that means that this is a biased question. People are probably more likely to choose the car that is nice and perfect and beautiful than the little compact thing that doesn't have any descriptors to go with it. It wouldn't be a problem if they just said, pick the sedan or the compact car. But when they start adding the descriptors to it, that's when it becomes a problem. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some more here about bias in question number 3. It says, Mary conducts a survey to find out which animals at the zoo are the most popular among visitors. Determine whether her claim is valid and explain. Okay, so the sample is 30 visitors outside the monkey house. Which animals at the zoo are your favorite? And then as you can see, the table lists monkeys, bears, and lions. Well, we have a problem here, all right, because it says here that the most popular are monkeys, but look at where she did the survey. Right? She did the survey right outside the monkey house. Well, chances are, if they're right outside the monkey house, there's a reason they're at the monkey house, because they probably like the monkeys. All right, so in this case here, this may not be valid. Now, that doesn't mean it necessarily is, it just means it may not be. All right, the sample here is biased, all right, based on what we're given here, because people standing outside the monkey house may be more interested in the monkeys. Think of it this way if that's not making sense to you. Let's say I went to a basketball game here in school, and I went and stood on the Westville side, and I asked people, what team are you rooting for? What do you think most people are going to say? Most people on the Westville side are going to say Westville. So chances are, if I'm taking a random sample around the room and I'm going to all the Westville side, I'm not going to get that much of a random answer because most of the people there are probably supporting Westville. Same thing here. If I'm at the monkey house and I'm asking what the favorite animal is, chances are the answer is going to be monkey. Right? And that's what's biased there. You have to make sure your samples are statistically valid, including that randomness, and really that randomness is lost here. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the concluding examples here. Number one, we're determining whether the sample may be biased, and then we are to explain. It says the sales manager of a large department store randomly chooses 40 previous customers to ask whether they were satisfied with the customer service they received. Well, again, the great equalizer is in this statement here. They use the word randomly. Anytime you see randomly, that's probably going to be a good thing here. Since they're saying randomly, this is not going to have a problem with bias. It is not biased. It is a true random sample. Let's try to number two here with the survey. Would you rather have a new widescreen or an old small screen television? Well, again, here we're going to see the problem with bias. It's not a problem to ask if people want a widescreen or a small screen. But once you start adding on other descriptors, that's when you have a problem. Here they're calling the one new, here they're calling the other one old. Once you start tagging on those descriptors, you're going to present bias to people. So here the question is going to be biased. They're probably going to pick the thing that's new as opposed to the thing that's old. And that's what's going to be the issue here. Again, anytime you start seeing them tag on descriptors, the alarm should go off in your head because those descriptors are always something that's going to skew the audience towards one sample or another.